All right, let's turn from the big beautiful bill to the big beautiful US of A. Brian, as you know, this week on Friday it is Independence Day, year number 249 for our great republic, a
A
big
lot of
anniversary
years.
coming up next year. Well, Gallup has been doing a poll for the last 25 years asking Americans if they are proud to be an American. As late as 2013, so not that long ago, 85% of people said they were either very or extremely proud to be an American.
Yeah,
A whopping 85%.
a lot.
12 years later, that number this year, 58%.
That's
That is
low.
quite a drop in a decade. So, what are your thoughts on that? What do you attribute that to?
I think we first need to establish, Eric, are you proud to be an American?
Yes,
Okay. So
absolutely.
you would answer that question just yes.
Yes.
And
I would have answered,
you would
I would
thank
be in the
Gallup for calling and tell them to have a nice day.
I would be in the very category because Brian, I do not let the perfect be the enemy of the good.
Hmm.
I I believe that you have to compare to what is realistic. What did Joe Biden used to say back when he was actually running for president against Trump? Don't compare me to the other guy, don't compare me to the almighty.
Yeah, right.
That is what you have to do with America. And I
Hmm.
understand we have our warts and our problems throughout our history, including today. But it's nothing compared to what much of the rest of the world, most of the rest of the world, has gone through. It's kind of like,
Or is going through.
I'm a pretty confident guy, but my confidence doesn't come from the fact that I think I'm great. I think I'm okay. My confidence comes
No,
from
stop. I need
I
to
don't
stop you there. Stop.
no,
I
my
love that
confidence
you're being humble on
no, I'm
there,
not.
but
I want to
yeah.
be I'm being honest. I'm confident not because I think I'm great. I'm confident because I don't think anybody else is really that
Oh,
great, right?
wow. Okay.
That is like that is and that's kind of how I feel about America. It's not that I think America is perfect and amazing. I just think when you look around and compare
Right.
overall, I am
It
definitely
depends how
proud
you
to be
grade.
American. What about you?
Okay, so I've been thinking all day when you said we were going to talk about this, how I can talk about it and not sound like a total cheeseball. Meaning, dude, I think America is the greatest country that has ever existed in the history of the universe and world. And we are the wealthiest country with the most educated people who innovate and create things. And when we compete in things, we dominate in them. And I mean, look, again, I said I wasn't going to try and be cheesy, but honest to God, when I was 18 and 19 years old, I was willing to die for this idea. Like, legitimately. Like, I believed it in my core and in my soul that it was worth protecting this thing because that's how, like, I read history. I mean, dude, you and I were best friends when we were kids. The idea of America is the greatest part of America. It's not what America was, it's not what America is now, it's what America aspires to be. That idea is worth fighting and dying for, legitimately, and I believe that. So if Gallup called me yes, I'd answer yes. I like America. Um, all of that to say that was totally cheesy and maybe even a little cliche because we do trail in a lot of areas, as you said, warts, this, that. We have our problems. We've made a tremendous amount of mistakes. We are a very young country in terms of history. We're not France. We're not England. We're not China. We don't go back to dynasties. But you know what, man? What we try and do and we try and contribute to the world, like it has so much value to me. How could you not go somewhere else in the world and be proud to be an American? I know we've talked about it on this show. Like I have the ability and I'm very fortunate to be able to travel. And when I go to foreign countries, when Trump was elected, I made the joke is I'm just going to tell everyone I'm from Canada, because it's a tough thing to like be in America. So I know where that 58% number comes from, but I would never do that because I go to another country, I'm like an American. Like, yeah, I'm proud. I'm very proud to be an American. I would never shy away from that. So I don't know, man. It's tough. I know where that 58% number comes from and why, but I also think, how are you rating this?
Well, it's driven, if you look inside the numbers, the drop is driven mainly by Democrats. Democrats,
Insane.
only 36% of Democrats say they are extremely or very proud to
Be a
be an
Democrat in the
American.
Philippines. Good. Let me know how that works out for you.
That is a drop of 26% in the last year.
Yeah, go to
So
Cuba.
Democrats in a year, which I mean, we all know why.
Go to
And
Russia.
look, I get the threats of Trump. We talk about it all the time. But even with Trump, at least so far, knock on wood, I want to be clear. I'm not making any predictions for the future. I'm saying as I sit here on June 30th, 2025, America's still pretty damn good,
We're
right?
pretty damn good.
So some of this is pure partisan politics. I think another thing though, be if you go beyond, if you were to say, okay, other than just pure partisanship, what else is maybe driving some of this? The other thing I think is the sense that it's hard to make a living in America
Oh
and
God,
harder to make a good living and harder than it has been in the past. There's some truth to
that
that.
is
I mean,
true.
by any objective standards, we are way better off than we were, say, 100 or 50 years ago in terms of the materialism and what we have. However, it's harder to get what you would consider to be maybe the average standard of living. Decent home, nice job, one person working if you choose to do that. That was a thing that was fairly attainable back in the day. Not so much now. And I do think there is something to that. It's particularly driven, I think, by the high cost of housing, by the high cost of things like groceries, just especially in our big cities. So I do think
Yeah,
there is something to that. When you're unhappy economically, that for a lot of people would tie into being unhappy with the
you're not
country.
proud to be an American.
And look, capitalism is essentially tied in with America in so many ways. And when you talk about a lot of the innovations, those are driven in large part because we have such a capitalist society, such as
Yes,
society geared toward free markets, which has been a wonderful thing.
yes,
However,
it's a
the
wonderful idea.
excesses the excesses of that, which we've seen in the past, and I think you could argue we see now with the vast income inequality we have, I think fires a lot of people up. I look at Mamdani, who is a 33-year-old Muslim democratic socialist who is an immigrant, came to America 6 years ago. Like, if I would have told you that kind of person would be the nominee and the likely next mayor of the biggest city in the country 10 years ago, you would have probably said you're crazy. Well,
No, I
here we
wouldn't have said
are.
you're crazy. I would have said it's improbable. I would have said it's unlikely. But that's the
and here
thing, man.
here we are. And particularly focusing on the democratic socialist part of that, he has a really aggressive critique of capitalism. And I don't agree with all of his solutions. I think some of them are kind of kooky, but I do think that there's a reason this guy who was unknown basically 6 months ago, he was at like 1%.
Yeah.
When Andrew Cuomo, the former governor, was in the 30s or 40s, everyone thought Cuomo was going to win this easily. And Mamdani just shot up like a rocket. And it was because I think mainly of his like laser focus on, I understand your pain about these costs and how expensive things are. And I have some solutions to try to make it better.
If only
And
Bernie Sanders would have done that.
well, that look, there Americans want to hear some of that. And again, I don't agree with everything he or people like Bernie say, but I do agree with the premise that we need to think outside the box about how hard it has become for the average citizen in this country to make a decent living and really enjoy a good quality of life. I mean, we do really need to come up with some. It's not enough to just say, "Oh, well, sorry." Like, I'm sorry, I know every generation before you, I know this may be the first generation that actually won't do as well as their parents did, but hey, you got a TV, right? And you probably have a car and you eat decent food, so you'll be fine. I think people need some solutions, and I think we should be willing to look in different places for those, even if I don't necessarily agree with all the proposals.
Can we take this in a different direction? Would you agree with me
Yes.
that in capitalism that there are going to be people that succeed and then on the other hand there are going to be people that fail? Like when you talk about capitalism, we're not talking about fairness. Like in capitalism, if you have a head start, if you have more money, if you come from a family of reasonable means, that you have a head start against a person who might not come from those same means, that it's more likely that the person that has the head start is going to be more successful. But the beauty of capitalism, just to defend it for a second, is that person that is two steps behind, or I know we always use baseball things like he started on third base, but like you can be behind and you can catch up. Like that's the beauty of America. Nowhere else really does that exist where you can come from nothing, like 1% of the vote, and swing into the lead. Like that's very rare. What I'm trying to say is, you and I have talked about capitalism a lot. You know that I think it's an imperfect system. Yes, it's imperfect, but I think it's better than anything else that has been tried in human history. I do think, however, that we are at a point where the wealth gap is so great that when this happens, it does begin to eat itself, and that's why people are so upset. Like,
Right.
that's not that hard to figure out.
No, if you love something, you've got to be able to recognize when it's not working the way it should, and recognize that it needs to be changed to be saved. And I think that's where we are with capitalism. And I don't mean saved as
Interesting.
in I don't mean saved as in like we're going to be a communist country. That's not what I'm
No,
saying.
no, God, no.
What I'm saying is if you want people to buy into it and preserve it similar to the way it runs now and keep the good things about it that we've discussed, you've got to change it.
It's
And
so
that's happened
nuanced,
through
though, Eric. Like,
that's
this is
happened
so
throughout our
deep.
history. Like
There is not
FD,
enough time in this podcast, man.
well,
Like, if
let
you
me
just talk about medical insurance, if you talk about the box stores eating small businesses in towns, it's very complex. And I'm sorry to interrupt
it
you,
is.
but I don't like it when, like, because this conversation is very complex and very nuanced. Because, like, in some portions, if the FTC did its job in a lot of these areas, you would still have more competition than you have in a lot of areas. So I do put a lot on the FTC for not doing that.
Well, we didn't even, that didn't even exist, and that's my point. Is like starting with FDR, and even before that, we said, you know what, we need some things. We need insurance for people who lose
Right.
everything. We need a federal trade commission. We need a federal communications commission. We need a federal exchange commission looking at trades. We need anti-monopoly laws.
Yeah.
All of these things, social safety net programs, but just kind of broad strokes. We need to make things, and I think government has a role to play here, more affordable for people. So the basics, I'm talking about healthcare, childcare, housing,
Housing.
but also part of the reason the gap has gotten so big is the changes to the tax code that have happened since the 1980s. It's just not fair that very wealthy people pay an effective tax rate lower than their secretaries. I mean, when they had the leak of the IRS returns a few years ago, and we
Shameful.
saw what Elon Musk and Jeff Bezos and Mark Zuckerberg, many years paying tiny, tiny percentages of their income and wealth in taxes. There should be a minimum threshold, and it shouldn't matter if you get that. Part of the reason is a lot of times they don't get their money from earned income, they get it from other sources. It
Yes.
shouldn't matter. When you reach a certain income threshold in America, it shouldn't matter where your income or even maybe wealth comes from. All that should matter is you pay a minimum rate, whatever that is, 25, 30%. That needs to be the standard because it's just not fair. And that's what a lot of people respond to. And look, I'm not saying that's why all these people are saying they're not very proud to be an American, but I'm saying I think there's something to the fact that people look around and they say, hey, the system's rigged. It's rigged for people who get their wealth a certain way because it is. Like our system is set up
Ah,
by and large to punish the wage earner at the expense of the person who owns capital. And there's the thing now, they call it buy, borrow, and die. And basically, if you're very wealthy, a lot of these very, very wealthy people, they have assets. They borrow huge
yeah.
amounts of money against the asset. They pay and then they live off of that loan, pay the loan back with another loan, and keep doing it until they die.
It's called
So
kiting, but
there's
anyway.
so there like we have to figure out a way to get revenue from that. I'm not a tax expert, but what I'm saying is people look when they see that kind of shit, they look at the system and say, this isn't set up for the average guy. This is set up for the big powered moneyed interests in a way that is really disproportionate.
Yeah, I'm none of those people. I'm a pretty far cry from Elon Musk or Jeff Bezos. But I just want to talk about the mentality for a second. Dude, it's easy to sit back and complain about the system and talk about how it's unfair. But I've genuinely believed this since I was a kid, which is you can do that and whine and cry about how unfair something is, or you can watch other people do it and say, you know what? I need to figure out how that works, and I need to do that myself. Now, again, I just said I'm a small cry from Jeff Bezos or Elon Musk, clearly, but I did look at the world and who was making money and who was being successful, and I tried to emulate what they did and how they succeeded to be successful. I am not a fan of paying taxes. I don't like giving the government money. So, what have I done in my 30s and 40s? I have figured out every way I possibly could to not to minimize my liability to the federal government as much as possible. Because it occurred to me that if these people are paying nothing, there have to be mechanisms in place for me and my income range that I can take advantage of. And I learned what they were, and I paid people to find them for me. And I took my effective tax rate under Obama from 50% to 15% in this current administration, because that's what you do. You can
Right.
either cry about the system or you can participate in it to the best of your ability. And I'm not trying to give a pep talk. I'm just trying to say you have to recognize that it's unfair, and that's fine. But you can
Yeah.
only operate in the parameters that you have. And I know you're talking about this at a higher level. And
Right.
I worry about my kids all the time. I do worry about them. But I just think, man, get in there, figure out how those things work, how those wheels turn, and manipulate them to your advantage. I really do believe that.
Yeah, but remember the system, as you say, it's not like God didn't put it on a rock that Moses
No,
found at
no,
the
I
top
know
of a
it's made
mountain.
up.
We did it. We
Right.
made it up. We continue to make it up all the time. The breaks, who gets what breaks, and
Yeah.
that's the point. My point is that the system over time, and it's sometimes not necessarily with bad intention, but it has gotten to the point where it's out of control and needs to be
Yeah.
reined in to make it a more level playing field. Um, let's talk briefly. Speaking of that, what did you think about Jeff Bezos' wedding? Did you see this and all the pushback over in Venice with his new bride, Lauren Sanchez, and the locals were protesting, and you had all these
Yeah.
celebrities from all
No,
over the
I
world
know.
in
The
their private
Kardashians were
jets.
there. It was a whole
Tom
thing.
Brady.
Well, is Tom Brady dating Sydney Sweeney? I saw that today. Dude, if he is, I love hate Tom Brady so much. You can't be the greatest quarterback of all time and also get Sydney Sweeney. Like that can't happen. It's too much.
Yes.
It's too
Speaking
much
of people
for any
accumulating,
person to have.
yes. Speaking of accumulating too much wealth and
Yes,
power, I
Tom
mean,
Brady has accumulated too much wealth and power. I find it obscene. No, no, no. But I mean, I thought the Jeff Bezos coverage and all that was really interesting for the perspective that like we usually capture weddings in this way for like kings and queens, where it's like, photographed and televised and like everything else. I mean, look, man, I'm never going to be able to mentally put myself in Jeff Bezos' shoes. Like it's impossible because it's inconceivable. But why would he give a shit?
right.
I'm honestly like you have more money than God. Dude, good for you, man. Like, and that's the thing, just to not circle back to our previous conversation where I gave the whole speech, is like, I feel like that's always been the difference between the way I view it and other people do. Is like, instead of saying, like, oh man, that's wrong, like, we're so poor and he's rubbing it in his face, I just go, good for you, man. Like, Jeff Bezos earned it. Like whether you like good, better, bad, whether Amazon the prism of good and bad frustrates me so much. But like, why can't we look at Jeff Bezos going crazy for his wedding and say, you know what, man, good for you. You worked really hard. You had an incredible idea. You worked with great people. You built a
Yeah.
successful thing. Just enjoy it.
Yeah. Well, I think it was overblown, a lot of the criticism, and I agree with you. Some of these people are just hating for no reason. I do think we we can have both. We can, on the one hand, celebrate the amazing ingenuity of Jeff Bezos and all that he has done for the economy, creating one of
It's
the
amazing.
iconic companies in
Hundreds of thousands of
history.
people thank them for their
Right.
job.
Right. And all of the jobs that flow from that and the economic development, and say that he's entitled to make a gazillion dollars and spend it as he wants, which he has and does. You can say that and also hold in your head at the same time the thought that someone in his position should be paying a high rate of taxes.
Yes, they should.
Like those two things, and
they
that's
can't
my only
exist.
point. Why can't they exist at the same time? They're both equally valid points of view, but so many people focus on only one or the other as if they can't be true at the same time. And that's all I'm saying. I am not like, I heard getting back to Mamdani, the likely next mayor of New York, say he doesn't believe there should be billionaires. I disagree.
No.
I'm okay with billionaires. But what I will say is, as long as they are paying a large amount of money in tax, because remember Obama had the famous line, and people gave him so much shit for it when he said, you didn't build this, when he was talking about business owners by yourself, essentially is what he meant.
Yeah.
And what he meant is there are roads. There's a trained workforce that went to college. There is the security and safety of America. There's the infrastructure here. Yes, your ingenuity, if you're Bezos or somebody like him, is amazing. But you got there in part because you didn't do it in the Congo or Uzbekistan.
Yeah.
You did it in the United States of America with all the resources brought to bear by the country you are in. And when you are that successful, yes, I think you do owe something back. And getting your effective tax rate down to 8% is not,
we agree.
Not meeting it.
But I would also say that gaming the system and taking advantage of it is like, I can't blame them. It's like when you and I have this.
My problem is with the system.
Yeah, right. I get that.
That's the problem.
I don't blame the person.
System.
I don't blame Bezos. I don't blame Zuckerberg. Just like I wouldn't blame you.
I blame the system. And that's why I'm saying this. The system, by the way, is just what we make up. Again, It is not a moral code given to us by the Almighty. We literally make it up and create it through our elected representatives.
My children are employees of my company. I pay them $6,999 a year. I wonder why I do that.
But the thing is, I know what you're saying, and I don't.
But that's not my fault.
What I would tell you, no, I don't blame you at all for that. What I would say to you is, you and people in your position, relatively speaking, have a lot more in common with the mechanic and teacher.
Oh, we do. We agree there.
$50,000 a year and paying not a ton of real dollars, but a high percentage of taxes. You have a lot more in common with them than you do with Jeff Bezos. And what some people have successfully convinced people in your
it's so great
area is that they actually have more in common with the Bezos.
It's amazing.
And I don't think correct me if I'm wrong, but you didn't take your private jet to Venice for that wedding, did you?
I don't have a PJ. It's currently not in the business plan, and I don't think it will be anytime soon. No, I love your point because it is true. I think I'm not speaking about, I use myself as an example because it's the easiest thing to do, but you and I fall in the same line in this. And I think I said there are worlds between them. What I would say though is, in fairness, the gap between where I'm at and where that mechanic is, that is continually growing as well. And that's the real problem. It's not me and Jeff Bezos. It's me and the mechanic, because that's the one that is raising exponentially, buddy.
Yeah.
And that's part of the problem in the economy is like the top 1-2% of income earners are so far ahead of the other 98%. That's where to bring this full circle back, are you proud to be an American? That's where it comes from. Because there is a lot of envy and a lot of jealousy. Why did this person succeed, but this person didn't? And again, just to wrap it into capitalism, there are going to be failures. There are going to be successes. The problem is we used to have a higher amount of successes relative to failures, and now it seems like that number of successes is smaller, and the number of air quote failures is much larger.
Let's turn to the world of sports. Our favorite team, the Pittsburgh Steelers, made a really big trade today, sending all-pro safety Minkah Fitzpatrick to the Miami Dolphins for Jalen Ramsey, the former Pro Bowl cornerback, who's one of the best corners in the league, and Juno Smith, one of the better tight ends in the NFL. Yeah, I really like this deal for the Steelers. What was your thought?
I don't know what so with Minkah Fitzpatrick, I know what we have, which is an all-pro safety. With Jalen Ramsey, it's a question, do we get the best version of Jalen Ramsey, or do we get the often injured, not available version of Jalen Ramsey? I like Juno Smith, but we also have Freiermuth already. So like it's a nice thing to add in. The pick swap is also nice. I just think Minkah Fitzpatrick is so valuable to the Steelers. And it's loaded now with Slay and Porter Jr. I mean, you have three really high-end corners. I like that. But now I'm kind of worried about the safety position. Right. And who steps in. So we're kind of like overloaded at tight end and cornerback. And I don't know, man. I would have kept Minkah. That's just me, but I could be convinced otherwise. Because here's the thing: if you get the best version of Minkah and you get the best version of Jalen Ramsey, you would 100% take the best version of Jalen Ramsey in terms of overall value. It's been a really crazy offseason as a Steelers fan. I don't know how you feel about it. This is the craziest. Are we like the Washington Commanders or like they used to be the Redskins? Are we Daniel Snyder, DK Metcalf, Aaron Rodgers, Jalen Ramsey? These are huge names in football that are now Pittsburgh Steelers. It's really strange because that hasn't been their MO for a long time.
I love it. And I love the fact that they're going all in, essentially, which is what this move shows you and what this offseason has shown you, with a 41-year-old quarterback who's probably in his last year. And you're trying to catch lightning in a bottle, and I love it. And I think that's what they should be doing. The reason I really like this deal is because I think for whatever reason, Minkah Fitzpatrick has not been the same guy. I mean, he was one of the elite defensive backs in football for about a 3-year period. But the last 2 years, and look, it's not just the interception drought, although there is something to that. I mean, the guy was a ball hawk for 3 years with the Steelers. And then in 2023, he had as many interceptions as you and I did. And then he didn't have one last season until I think week 16. He had like a 25 or 30 game drought without a pick. And if you remember last year, one of the biggest problems the Steelers had, particularly late in the season, is just complete blown coverages. This happened a head-scratching number of times where they literally, it wasn't like somebody got beat. It's somebody wasn't there. Yeah. There was a receiver wide open. And look, that happens once or twice, fine. But it happened a bunch to the Steelers. And he is the quarterback of that secondary. So he deserves, I would say, a lot of the blame for that. And for whatever reason, he just was not the same guy the last few years. Now, to be fair, Ramsey also has not been.
No, right. That's consistent. What I was saying.
But Ramsey is a top 10 cornerback in the league if he's healthy. Easily. Right.
No, top 10. Dude, he's like legit top 3.
Right. He might be.
He's insane.
And cornerback in today's NFL is a much more important position than safety, particularly when, as you mentioned, you have Slay and Porter Jr. now, and you're going up against Joe Burrow and Lamar Jackson and maybe Patrick Mahomes and maybe Josh Allen. You have got to cover. And the Steelers, throughout the past, I'd say 6, 7, 8 years, have not been a very good coverage team. And now, on paper at least, they should be with those 3 corners. So I love that move. And also Smith, like, don't sleep on him. No. I think he had the 5th most yards of a tight end last year. And here's why that matters. The Steelers don't really have a number 2 receiver. Like, yeah, I love DK Metcalf, but someone else has to catch the football. And so now you can imagine two tight end sets with Fryermuth and
Yeah,
Smith,
yeah.
putting a lot of pressure on defenses. So I think this is a really good move for the Steelers, particularly if they want to go all in this year, which they should. I did see reports though that TJ Watt, who has didn't skipped minicamp and wants a new contract, teams are calling, trying to trade for him.
Out of their minds.
So far, the Steelers have not shown
No.
interest.
Are you kidding me?
I don't think that will happen. I
Never.
will say this. If you get late in camp and it's clear there is just no deal to be done, maybe if you can get like a king's ransom for him, you pull the trigger.
No, that's right. You'd have to get a king's ransom because I will take 1 year of TJ Watt angry on not getting a new contract over no years of TJ Watt. Dude, when TJ Watt is on the field, they are a different team.
They are. Although, again, I mean, to be fair, he was not great last year, especially again at the end of the season. He disappeared for a big stretch.
What a cutthroat business the NFL is, man. It's crazy.
He's 30 years old.
He's a decoy.
Like he was about as dominant as you could be.
He was like Brian Urlacher or Ray Lewis, legitimately.
Right.
That's not hyperbole.
He led the NFL in sacks 3 times in 4 years.
It's crazy.
Nobody has ever done that.
Yeah.
Nobody's led the league in sacks 3 times in their career.
Right.
He did it 3 times in 4 years. But last year, 11 and a half sacks, down from 19.
That's pretty good.
And if you look at his game log, I think I'm right on this, that he basically disappeared down the stretch. Yeah, last 3 games of the regular season, when everything was on the line, and if you recall, the Steelers ended the regular season with a 4-game losing streak that cost them a home playoff game. Baltimore in week 16, 0 sacks. Kansas City week 17, 0 sacks. Cincinnati week 18, 0 sacks. Against Baltimore, 0 sacks, 0 tackles.
Yeah.
And the wild card round. I'm just saying, if you're the guy, right? I understand double teams. We get it. We need a little bit more in that. Like we need a little bit more in the big game.
We do.
And remember, he wants elite level money. 40 million. I think Myles Garrett signed for an average value of 40
I would take Myles Garrett over TJ Watt. I would.
At this moment, I would. I wouldn't have said that a few years ago. A few years ago, I think I would have taken Watt, but now I think I'd take Garrett. And so if you're committing, what the Steelers are going to have to do to make him happy is commit $40 million a year to a guy who will be in his early 30s. Well, I would probably do it just because I would hate to see him put up 15 sacks for somebody else for the next 3 years. So I would probably do it, but it's not a no-brainer. Like I understand why the Steelers are playing hardball with the contract.
But this is like I was saying, it's such a cutthroat business. It kind of reminds me of like Derek Jeter, like when he was like in his mid-30s. You know, the Yankees played hardball with Jeter, which like we never remember that, and it's like crazy to think about. But Brian Cashman basically went to Jeter and was like, "You're not A-Rod." Right. Like that's a hard conversation to have with the captain, right? Like the best Yankee on the World Series winning teams, but I'm talking about 2009, 2010. I know I'm doing deep into baseball history here, but my point is going to be that like we got the best years out of TJ Watt, and this is always the hardest part in a contract negotiation. Is like as a business, you want to pay people as little as possible to get as most out of them as you can. And only when you know they have elite level performance ahead of them do you pay them for that service. Because you have to remember in sports, we're not going to, I say we, but like if I'm looking at it from the business perspective, we don't want to pay TJ Watt for what he did in the past. We want to pay $40 million for what he's going to do right now. Mm-hmm. And so I think the Steelers have a legitimate point in playing hardball with him, which is why I made the Derek Jeter point. It's a really tough conversation to have with someone who's beloved and someone who's been great, to go to them and say, like, look, man, like, we love you. We want to keep you, but like, you're not Myles Garrett. You were Myles Garrett 4 years ago. You're not Myles Garrett now. So hopefully I could imagine that's a tough conversation to have.
they'll probably settle on something maybe a little bit short of that. I hope that's where it happens. All right, Brian, we haven't really been watching much, so we'll skip TV and movies this
We
week.
can do that.
Why don't you give us your final thought for the week?
My final thought for the week. Dude, I'm pretty good. I don't know if this is going to make the cut or not, but earlier Eric was struck. He suffered an injury during this podcast.
I did.
He
I was
did.
struck by a door while we were recording the beginning of this, but I don't think anyone will ever see that. I know that.
No, I only
hopefully no
mentioned
one
it to
will see
say
it.
I want to, dude, my dear friend. God, I love you, man. You just fight through it. Like
I
sometimes
power
we
through.
joke around, like you're a little under the weather,
I'm a
like we're
true
gonna fight
professional.
through this. You really are a true professional.
I
I'm telling
literally
you
got
right
hit
now,
by a
if an
door.
object with the weight and force of a door had struck me in the head during this podcast, we would have not continued. I would have just been like, it's not in it for me. So, like, kudos to you, man. I
You
really,
know
yeah,
what, Brian? I believe you have to just persevere. You just keep going. You play hurt if you have to. You
yeah,
play through pain,
you did.
and you got to get it done. It's kind of like Tyrese Halliburton. You saw him out there in the NBA
Oh
Finals,
God, I
gutting it
can't
out
relive that.
until he tore his Achilles.
That was
So
like the only comment on our YouTube video, and God bless you, sir, for listening through to the sports section of
well,
our little thing. Was
think about
about
the torn Achilles and how they've altered the NBA. Like Boston has
oh my
essentially
God,
sold
Tatum.
off its parts because Tatum's going to be out all year, Halliburton going to be out all year, Lillard going to be out all year. Means that Giannis we'll see, force his way out of Milwaukee. Uh, it's wild that those three Achilles injuries have just like devastated franchises and changed. And for Boston, they saved so much money, but they traded away Porzingis, they traded away Holiday, and they're
Yeah,
not going to have Tatum all year. And this is a team that won the title with those guys just 12 months ago.
yeah. I feel like that organization knows what they're doing. That's what's funny about it.
They'll be
Aren't
all
there
right.
like some organizations where when they do things that you would normally scratch your head at, it's like Belichick. When Belichick would do something in a game, you were like, well, he's the GOAT, so he knows what he's doing.
He'll figure it
But
out.
like if Tomlin does it, you're like, what a moron. Like, what an idiot. But I feel
Yeah.
like Boston is one of those franchises where you're just like, well, they're probably the greatest basketball franchise in history. You know, they and the Lakers. So don't they just know what they're doing? They'll like figure it out.
Probably. Yeah.
It's hard to imagine the Celtics becoming, the LA Clippers.
No, they'll be bad or mediocre this year, and then when Tatum comes back 2 years, they'll retool. They saved a bunch of money, and they'll be a contender again.
Yeah.
All right, we'll leave it there for this week. For Brian Johnson, I'm Eric Messersmith. Thank you for being with us. We hope you enjoyed the show, but if not, please take no offense.